This is a 1982 Porsche 924 and it's one of the less well regarded Porsches, being regularly overshadowed by the more powerful and more modern 944. The 924 debuted in 1975 as a replacement for the old Porsche 914, but unlike that car, it dispensed with the mid-engine layout and instead went to a front-engined and rear-wheel drive layout. And it was in fact the first Porsche to be launched that had this layout with the engine at the front and rear drive. The 924 was an incredibly important car for Porsche, selling over 150,000 units between 1975 and 1988. Just like the SUVs today, we see that this car is what enabled Porsche to carry on making more exotic and faster cars like the 928 and the newer 911s.
As is well known, the 924 was originally a joint venture between Porsche and Volkswagen to produce an affordable sports car. But unlike the 914, there was a difference. This car was also due to be badged as a Volkswagen. The old 914 did have a VW badge on the back, but the new car was going to be sold as a Volkswagen in Volkswagen dealers. Rather predictably though, the chassis was pretty much all Porsche, and the engines were sourced from VW. More on that soon. You can tell this car had some proper thinking to it, as there's a transaxle in the back. This is something the 944 is commonly lauded for, but of course they're both the same platform. This meant a 48-52 weight distribution, and the car was pretty much finished until the oil crisis hit in 1973. After that, Volkswagen weren't really very interested in pursuing the project much further, but Porsche really needed a 914 replacement, so it was rescued from the scrap pile and went into production in 1975. So now we can talk about that engine, and the first thing you'll hear people scream when you mention the Porsche 924 is that it has the engine from a van. Well, no, but also yes. This is a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine from the Audi 100. At about the same time as the 924 was launched, it also ended up in the Volkswagen LT van. But this isn't such a bad thing. Vans are big, heavy, boxy things with the aerodynamic properties of a house, and they need to lug about a load of old junk. They need good engines. This is said engine, but with Bosch fuel injection instead of a carburettor. And you could get it attached to a 4-speed manual, 5-speed manual, or for the first time in a Porsche, an automatic gearbox. The disappointment for the critics came from a perceived lack of grunt, 123 brake horsepower, and the braking setup. There were drums at the back, although discs were an option. I'm not going to get into an argument of discs versus drums, as down there only madness lies, but what I will say though is that the 914 had discs all round. But despite these flaws, the car handled brilliantly and it was reliable, all things that were important in a mass-produced car. The suspension isn't particularly different or interesting, but it provides really good results. The 924 has a reputation as a very competent car with good handling. The front is McPherson struts with an anti-roll bar on later models, and the rear is independent, trailing arms and a torsion beam, along with that transaxle for weight distribution. The chassis is galvanised, so they take a bit longer to rust out. This car was launched in 1975 and Porsche were offering 6-year bodywork warranties, and that says an awful lot about the quality of the metal in these cars.
This particular car is a Porsche 924 2-litre Luxe. It's the one that people could actually afford. There were numerous special editions of the 924, such as the 924S, the 924 Turbo and the 924 Carrera GT. But this is the one people actually aspire to afford. I really love the way the 924, the 944 and the 968 Porsches look, but I think this is the best looking of them all. It's very straight, it's very classic, the looks are very nice, and yes, I said the front end is slightly anonymous, but it's all wedgy and lovely in 70s. I think it's a really good looking car, and these alloy wheels are fantastic as well. They're only 14 inch, but they look brilliant. And I love the touch here with the sweeping up rear window and the wraparound rear window. I think it looks fantastic.
Without the flared arches of the 944, the 924 is smooth and uninterrupted. It's a much cleaner, more classic design.
So now I'm inside a Porsche 94 with these gorgeous seats. I mean, you don't get these kind of colours anymore in cars, and only Porsche would. Brilliant. But obviously you sit quite low, well, very low in the car, as you would in any sports car, supercar, you'd expect so, and the transmission tunnel is very, very high, so the gear lever falls to hand very well. The driving position is very nice. Your legs sit very flat on the floor, and obviously the gear lever is very, very easy to hand, and the gear throw itself is short, as the gear lever itself is short. It's a nice notchy little gearbox. Obviously that's all character, but you've got the great Porsche dials in front of you. You have your speedometer with odometer without 100,000 miles in there, so I suppose this one's done 113,000 miles and not 13,000. It certainly feels like it's done 113,000 miles. You've got a little trip underneath it, and on your left hand side you have water temperature, you have various warning lights and fuel gauge. On the right hand side you have a tachometer that's inverted 180 degrees, which is, I don't know, I suppose that's sporty, but very 80s Porsche steering wheel with a horn. Oh, does the horn not work without the ignition? That's a bit of a shame. Let's give it a go. There you go. There's your horn. And in the centre you have more gauges, because more gauges is better. You have oil pressure in. You have a analog clock which you can hear ticking, and a voltmeter so you know when your alternator belt slips off and it falls down to 10 volts. You have the most haphazardly placed lights for your handbrake and your brake fluid warning ever. I mean, you know, I'm sure some space would have been able to be found in here, or maybe at the top of the tachometer here, but no, they decided to place two big red lights there, so you never forget that your brakes, your handbrake is on or your brake fluid is low. And no radio in here, but then again, I suppose you want to hear the engine, but then again, it's only a 4-cylinder, so I don't know. Also, it's a Porsche, you should have a stereo. Anyway, if I bring the gear lever away, you have obviously a cigarette lighter, but with no cigarette lighter, so it's 12 volt sockets. You have your rear fog lamp switch and your heater switch. Now, none of this feels like the most excellent quality ever. It all feels plasticky, all feels slightly brittle, all feels slightly old-fashioned, but it's the era of this car is, and it's the price bracket that this car is as well. And obviously sliders for your heater controls, and a little cubby down here, which is, I suppose, where the radio would be. And all this centre console is all lined in carpet, which is very nice. Obviously brown, beige loveliness. And your ashtray here, which is goes all the way down there, but you can't open it all the way down there. It just seems quite a convoluted method. I'm sure this will come out, but I'm not going to try and make it come out because I'll probably pull the entire centre console out with it. I have these 4 switches down here, which are quite interesting. That one is for your rear wiper, as you'd suggest. This one is to change how your full beams flash. So obviously this car has pop-up headlights, which we will see come up now. Ignition and lights. Yeah. So that changes whether when you flash the lights, the pop-ups flash or the side lights in the bumper flash. So, well, that's what I've been told it does. So there you go, there's an interesting quirk. And that is Headlamp Wash, which is a great feature. The owner didn't even know what that button did, but we've figured it out. And the weirdest button of all, because of its placement, is this is to switch between which wing mirror you're adjusting. But the switch for changing which mirror it is down here, but the actual control is down here, which means it's a two-handed job to adjust your mirrors, which is just, yeah. The doors themselves have Porsche written across them in big letters, because you can never forget what kind of car you're in when you've got badges everywhere. Badge on the steering wheel, badge on the glove box, big Porsche lettering on the doors, and brown headlining, which is great, and obviously a sunroof as well, but that leaks like sin, because of course it does. And back towards the doors, you have obviously door handle, all pretty standard, and you have electric window controls, which are miscoloured buttons. The original button is in the glove box, but
it's not fitted. I don't know why a previous owner has fitted the incorrect coloured switch, even though the switch does still exist for that. I have no idea on the logic. But you have these little tiny vents at the side here. Obviously you have much bigger ones in the centre. But you also have a defrost, so I'm going to guess that directs air upwards through the incredibly cracked dashboard. But that's a feature of all cars of this era. But yeah, these little tiny vents that, like, again, as I said in the Maxi video, you could cover that up with 2 fingers, really. The same on the other side, of course. And you get these little tiny door pockets. They're really, really small, only enough to fit little bits and pieces in. No, the steering column doesn't adjust. So I suppose if you had bigger legs than I have, you might think the steering wheel is a little bit too low. I think it could do with being a little bit higher up, but that's just one of those things. Of course, as I didn't mention, it's a 5-speed gearbox, but earlier 94s than this that had 5 speeds had a dogleg gearbox. So first would have been there, second, third, fourth and fifth where reverse is. If I can engage reverse, that is where fifth would be. And then I suppose reverse would have been there. But at some point in the production run of 94s, I think it was 1982, which is the year this car was made, but I'm not 100% sure, they switched to a conventional first gear, just to make it a little bit more user-friendly, because I suppose there would have been instances with people going like that to pull away from traffic lights and then going backwards. The glove box is quite posh, actually, because if we open it up, it's lined, which is, I suppose, is some kind of luxury. And it's quite a nice size as well. Again, there's that window switch I mentioned. And underneath the Porsche emblem there's a lock. And so you'd expect locks on a car of this era, on the glove box. In fact, you still get it on many cars, but there's a little Porsche emblem that slides across the lock, just to keep it classy. So now the stalks, and obviously your left stalk does your indicators, which is the wrong way around, but that's the way it's going to be. You have your flash and click for your main beam. And behind that, you have your hazard lights. That's a nice, pleasing noise. You have your heated rear window. You have your ignition barrel with, take the key out, lovely Porsche key, and lovely Porsche spare key as well. Pop that back in. And next to it, we have really rather close to it as well. These switches are really close behind the stalks and stuff. Of course, you have your lights, which bring up your mad pop-ups, and that is for your gauge illumination. This stalk here on the right hand side is your wiper stalk, which is in a weird place because it's much higher than the indicator stalk is, but that's the way it's going to be. And that is your intermittent, first speed, second speed. Oh, I almost forgot. Porsche doing Porsche things. The handbrake is at the side of the seat here, and the excuse for that will probably be for Le Mans starts, or the fact that the centre console doesn't have very much space for it and the driveline is very high up in the body. But Porsche doing Porsche things, the handbrake is by the driver's seat. I'm going to have to get in, aren't I? Let's see how much of a struggle this is. Right. Feet in. It's quite a high car, so it's alright. And yeah, so not so much headroom. I'm very upright, and yeah, even with all the man spreading in the world, this isn't a particularly practical car. This is definitely a 2+2. And under the lifting glass hatchback, you have a relatively large surface area of boot, but obviously the floor is very, very high owing to the transaxle layout of the car. And under here, if I can get in, there is a spare alloy, but of course the floor is that high because it has to be for this layout. And if you thought all your stuff would be unprotected and visible to the outside world, there is a load cover. In brown, of course. Yeah, there are lots of handover VW parts. The door handles, for example. But carryover parts are a feature of pretty much every car, so you can't really criticise it for those. The 924 is no longer the pauper's Porsche. They're starting to appreciate and be appreciated. And rightly so. It's a fun, well-engineered, well-made, relatively quick and good-looking car with the prestige that comes from all those traits and that Porsche badge on the front. But if you're buying a 924 in 2019, are you buying it because it's the best car for the price? Probably not. There are a lot of other very good sports cars you can buy for that price. Even when it was new, some reporters were disappointed with the left-hand drive wipers and the trim rattles. It's really quite a noisy car considering how much Porsche were charging for it back in the day. I do like it a lot, but I can't help thinking that the badge on the front does it a lot of favours.
Now, this isn't an advert or anything like that, but I have to comment on the work that Porsche does in regard to its classics. Porsche has this unbelievable service where you can get pretty much every part brand new. They're not mega expensive. You can get old documentation for cars, and you can get a car completely restored. You can buy cars that are pretty much brand new from Porsche, which is just fantastic. I think that's a great level of service that more manufacturers should emulate. I mean, I know Jaguar Land Rover are starting doing something like that, but Porsche's service is second to none. Some people call this the pauper's Porsche, but I disagree. Sod the naysayers. This is just a really good car. It's not massively quick, but it's got usable power on British roads. And it's relatively simple, it's relatively cheap, and it's fun to drive. And that's all you want out of a car, really. You don't want something with 900 horsepower that spins wheels all the time. You want something that is usable and fun. And the Porsche 924 is usable fun. Thank you for watching.